So does Kava actually get you high? So it all depends on how you define high. Traditionally, what we think of as high is something that brings about kind of an altered state, like of inebriation, that usually comes with a level of addiction, dependency, impairment, or alteration past a certain point, right? We think of it as kind of like most things that actually get you high or get you feeling good, right? That's really what we think about. We think about euphoric, right? Are things that are guilty pleasures, right? There are things that actually impair you, that are addictive, that are somewhat toxic, right? And so the word high kind of even carries a lot of like negative baggage, right? But Kava is actually kind of in a category of its own. I call it hyper sobriety. So it's kind of like an optimized state of mind that also gives you like a short-term immediate euphoria, but it's a natural euphoria, almost like you ever go do a hard workout or a hard run, right? Where you get that sort of rush of endorphins and you just kind of feel like more of yourself, or go on a roller coaster, right? You know, these are endogenous highs that come from within. Kava is like that. But it's kind of in its own category because there are very few substances on the planet that can actually activate that with something that you drink or take. You normally have to stimulate yourself mechanically in some way. You normally have to do some reps at the gym. You normally have to do some sprints to kind of get those, sit in the sauna, right? But Kava kind of gets you there to a substantial level through something that you can actually drink and take, and then some. Kava has the greatest therapeutic effect to drawback ratio of any compound that I've ever worked with. And that means that it gives people what they really want out of taking a functional substance, right? It gives you that immediate lift in mood, that immediate relaxation, that immediate sort of clarity and focus, but without addiction, dependency, withdrawal, or toxicity. And that's what differentiates it from alcohol on the relaxation or social lubricant side, or like something like an Adderall or a Ritalin on the productivity or on the focus side. It kind of takes the effects of all of these substances that people use for performance and recreation, but sort of wraps it into one. But it's not even like it's doing it. It's always been there. It predates all of us, right, by thousands of years. So it's like to have something that you can take that just can pattern interrupt your mood, right, that can shift you into a different state to where you just kind of, put you in that flow to where you feel more like yourself. You feel more grounded and present and productive and creative and introspective without the crash at the end of the day, or without the toxicity, or without having to have more Kava the next day just to meet your status quo, right? I would describe it as a calm, enhanced state of natural sobriety, right? So it's a calm but yet euphoric and focused. So it kind of takes that balanced framework that you have at baseline and it just amplifies the best attributes of it, if you will. It really is just kind of a state of like flow and presence. We hear this term flow state a lot today, and I think it's kind of overused with marketing and so many like nootropics and compounds that you take. They say, well, find your flow in this and that or whatever. But Kava is one of those things that's like tried and true over 3,000 years. Like there's whole cultures built around this one compound, and there's a reason for that. Is because the state that it elicits, the natural high, if you will, or the functional state, I call it a peak state of mind, or like a peak flow state. Kava is a very experiential thing, both to individuals and collective groups of people when they get together, that it's just become sacred. If you're in an optimized, perfect, like balanced state, then you're gonna get lots of things done, you're gonna connect with people, you're gonna be focused, you're gonna be relaxed, you're gonna be inspired. And that's really the difference, right, in the Kava experience and sort of the synthetic drug or alcohol experience, right? Is it's like alcohol without the drunkenness, but plus more. It's not only not a drug or not alcohol, but it's like an anti-drug because it repletes the feel-good systems in the body, because the more that you take it over time, it's like investing in your health, it's like investing in your brain, which ultimately puts you in a better state, and then it's like investing in your life, right? You're more creative, you're more inspired, you're more introspective. What we're actually set out to try to do by integrating Kava into modern culture is, the goal is to redefine recreation, right? We think of recreation as sort of like this negative context sometimes of something that you do outside of the things that actually matter. It's like, okay, here's things that matter, and then here's things that you do for recreation. But it's like this idea, Alan Watts, famous philosopher, used to always talk about how important it was to rediscover a state of play in your life, right? And that really comes, what is play? It's like, you have that kind of like childlike sense of curiosity and drive, and the world just seems wonderful and everything seems interesting. You get up in the morning and you're excited about what you're doing, and it's like you're going to work and it's like your playground, right? And obviously, it's all a matter of perspective, but it's all relative to the state that you're in. The state determines your perspective on how you see the world and how you see your daily life circumstances. To be able to find a state of play or recreation in everything that you do, right? And that's kind of at the crux of why Kava is like this absolutely sacred all-purpose medicine in Polynesia and why they use it for everything. Because they believe that from a spiritual standpoint, it gives them the ability to be able to invest in their mental health to where that they can look at life and experience life on the day-to-day from an optimistic and hopeful perspective, right? It just allows them to kind of inhabit that state of mind. Now, it might seem or sound overly grandiose, but it is something that does happen gradually over time, right? It's the states that sort of like define our lives and define our behaviors. Your state, your mentality is what creates your thought process, your behaviors, which is what creates your life outcome, right? So a natural high, I wouldn't even as much call it a natural high, even though you could, but really it's a peak state of mind. So I almost wouldn't even categorize the effects of Kava as a high, right? I mean, we say that because it's the most accessible word, right? But it's really that plus much more. It's more like a calm, relaxed, optimized, like peak state of mind. It's more about optimization over intoxication. So it really is kind of redefining what recreation can be in its own context, and it's redefining what we constitute as a natural high.